Your brain is wired to be negative to help you survive.
People feel like there's something broken in their brain. Focusing on the positive parts of your life actually stimulates the brainstem region that produces dopamine.
That was proved wrong.
Telling our brains positive things. You could have a bad day, and then this is no way to diminish anything that people would be suffering.
The reality is that you have to have purpose, and you have to have gratitude, and you have to have that balance.
Oh, that's like anxiety.
The risk and reward of building a business or investing my time or energy here versus there. One of the things that you mentioned is goals.
Goals are extremely helpful. The problem is, do you have the right goals? Are they aligned with your values and deepest dreams?
Is there any research or any beliefs that you've found in regards to people that a religion having a belief in God is beneficial or not?
Are you looking for actionable insights from the world's most inspiring individuals? The Built by Love podcast is on a mission to transform your life, your business, and your health. Tune in for impactful conversations with people who do business differently. Avoid burnout, acquire freedom, and live life fully on your own terms. With me, your host, Daniel Bussius, alongside my co-host, Richard Varga.
Alex, it's an absolute pleasure to have you as a guest on the Built by Love podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out to be on the show today.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, what we like to do on the show is we like to start with a question that really ties back into a profound moment that's changed the trajectory of your profession, who you are, and what you've chosen to focus on in life. So can you take us to a moment in time that has shaped that for you that's been profound?
A profound moment. I think just there was a time in college where I was like, everything started to feel really difficult. And it was my senior year, and I just didn't have as much energy as I used to. It was harder to concentrate. I remember I was when I was signing up for classes, I was like taking this philosophy class on existentialism, actually. And I just remember I was like the closest I'd ever come to like a panic attack. I just was like, too many people around me, and I was like almost started sweating. It was like very weird, but there was like nothing specifically like wrong with my life, and so it was very confusing. And I kind of realized later that I was like kind of depressed, but there wasn't like one specific cause. It was like, oh, I'm, stressed about doing my best this semester, and also anxious and wondering like, well, what am I going to do after college? And also like a crisis of sort of meaning, like, well, what am I going to do that's like meaningful and have an impact on this? Perhaps that's why I was drawn to this existentialism class. Also, as I realized in retrospect, like it was, the days were getting shorter, and it was in New England, and, don't get that much sunlight. And I realized there were all these little different pieces that were kind of making me more stressed or anxious or doubting myself or questioning, and that was creating this downward spiral. I noticed also later, I was like, oh, but I was lucky because there were all these other things that I was doing accidentally that were contributing to an upward spiral, that were preventing me from sinking down too far. Like I was, living with my friends, so I had a lot of social support, and I was playing ultimate frisbee, so I got like a break, a few times a week from existential crises to actually just like, oh, do something fun and like physical. And I realized that these notions of like depression and anxiety are a lot more complex than most people think. Because I used to think like, oh, you get depressed when like your life looks bad and everything's terrible. But really, there's all these different separate triggers that can be pushing you towards a downward spiral. And some of those are internal, like being really hard on yourself. Some are internal and actually good, like having really big goals. Like that's a wonderful quality to have and expecting your best, but sometimes that can create unnecessary stress, particularly when you're doubting yourself or feeling, less confident than normal. And there's not like one big magic solution all the time that gets rid of it. It's often these little things in different parts of your life, a lot of which you're doing unintentionally. But it was later in learning more about the neuroscience, they started to see, oh, well, these things work because of how they affect the brain. And you don't just have to sit around hoping and waiting that like all the things fall into place. You can actually start to get rid of some of these things that are creating the downward spiral and actually add in a little bit from here or there of things that are creating an upward spiral and completely break out of that pattern.
In college, by the way, I grew up on the East Coast, so I very much am aware of the seasonal depression and all of those things that you're talking. I empathize with you because I felt that too.
Yeah. And I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. So like it wasn't perhaps something that I had considered before. And I was excited to go to college on the East Coast. I was like, oh, it'd be fun to have seasons and just a different experience. But that also illustrates a point that sometimes the changes that we make in life, even for good, can have unintended consequences. But we're like, when we think about it, we're like, no, but this is a good thing. This is I wanted. And you're like, oh, right. But like there was this little change of like the less light or, just not being in your normal social network of like things that weren't the main reason why you did it, but they were inadvertent causes. Like I actually remember when you first asked the question about profound, the first thing that popped into my head was this other little dumb thing that wasn't profound, but I write about it in the Upward Spiral. My boss in my postdoc, he bought me a MacBook Air, and I think the MacBook Airs had like just come out, and it was amazing. Like, whoa, this like super thin, lightweight thing. And he was like, oh yeah, like you can just work from anywhere. You don't have to come into the office, and you just take it with you anywhere. And I was like, oh, this sense of like freedom, and it was awesome. And what I found is that I could just work from my couch at home, and I could just like get work done. I felt really productive. But after like a month, I started getting like pain in my hip from like, terrible posture. And I just didn't have as much energy. And it wasn't depression. It was just realizing, oh, I used to bike ride like 20 minutes every day to get to UCLA. And now I'm like, oh, I don't have to do that because I can just work from my couch. But maybe just sitting on your couch isn't the best way to be the most productive, or B, to actually have good ergonomic function so you don't create pain for yourself, and C, like, yeah, you don't have to exercise now, but it's still probably a good idea. And also, like, you're just in this dark apartment and not like getting sunlight to stimulate your circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
So I just made a little tweak. I was like, oh, when I wake up and before I start working, I could just start working right away. But I'm not going to. I'm going to walk out of the door and like walk around 3 blocks. It's just like a small amount of physical activity to get some sunlight, and also like an emotional trigger to like, okay, and now it's time to start working. And there's that like little tweak made things so much easier. And I also realized that just because I don't have to go into work doesn't mean that I don't want to go in. I was like, oh, I actually feel more productive when I go in there and, work from my office.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of times these inadvertent things that happen as a result of our choices that create these downward spirals.
Would you say that you are inspired to become a neuroscientist and then ultimately, of course, study depression and study these areas that ultimately came to you writing multiple books? Did Was that inspired because of your own struggles in college, or is it something you already knew when you were going into college, like that was the direction that you were going to aspire to?
No, I think growing up, I always kind of wondered, like, I've always been emotional. I like never would have said I had anxiety as a kid. I just like got a lot of stomach aches when it was like time for a test or like getting on a roller coaster. And it was only later that I started to realize, like, oh, that's like anxiety. And I had a lot of emotions and self-doubt. And I was like, but it doesn't seem like everyone has these same things. And like, why does this happen to me just like sometimes, and like other times it's easy to feel confident and energized and productive. And so just sort of wondering why it's different between people or why it's different within myself is one of the things that made me interested in the brain in the first place. And certainly my own experiences with some of these issues made me more interested in like studying the circuits. What really put me on a path towards getting a PhD, though, and writing this book is unfortunately a very sad story. It starts off fun and lighthearted. I was coaching the UCLA women's ultimate frisbee team. I was working at the brain mapping center at UCLA because I was like, oh, I majored in neuroscience. I should like get a job in a neuroscience lab. And the women's team had just started, and I was like, oh, I love ultimate frisbee. I played in college. Like, I'll coach them, and it was awesome. It was one of the most fun things I've done in my life. I'm still doing it like 20 years later. But there was one girl on the team who, she was really athletic and she was really outgoing, and she had a great sense of humor, though I kind of just say that because she laughed at my lame jokes. So I always think someone has a good sense of humor when they, when they humor you, or when they have your sense of humor. But she was kind of an enigma because she would, was really athletic, and then she'd come and say, oh, I'm feeling tired. Can I just like sit out? I'm like, well, you're just like sprinting all over the place. And then she'd like miss practices a lot because she said she was feeling sick. And it seemed to happen a lot. And she revealed to me after a few months that like, oh, when she said she was sick, what she really meant is she was depressed. And she had been suffering from major depression for years. And just like, even sometimes in the middle of practice, it would catch up to her and she couldn't focus or couldn't keep running. And she could recognize how valuable being a part of the team was to her, because it helped keep her from getting stuck in these downward spirals too far.
You didn't start your business to be a full-time marketer. You started it to take control of your future and live life on your own terms, to earn abundantly, and to make a positive impact in this world. But somewhere along the way, funnels, lead magnets, landing pages, and email sequences became your second job. At Built by Love Agency, we get it, and we've got you. We specialize in done-for-you marketing that speaks your brand, sells your services, and brings in your dream clients without you lifting a finger. Whether you're ready to scale or just tired of duct taping your marketing together, it's time to hand it over to the pros. We've been in business since 1998 and have worked with over 1,000 brands, ranging from Fortune 500 companies to small businesses with visions to change the world. Our experience in what we do runs deep, and our multiple awards, accolades, and decades of happy clients shows what we do for our clients works. Visit BuiltByLove.com today to schedule your discovery call so you can get back to doing the work you love. An agency you'll love, results you'll love even more. BuiltByLove.com.
And seeing her situation really made me think about depression in a different way, because as I said, I used to think like when, it makes sense when someone's depressed, when like, oh, their life looks terrible and it's depressing, but it's like, but you're smart and successful and you have a lot of great friends, like you have a lot of opportunity in front of you, like this doesn't make sense. And that sort of bothered me. And what made it worse is that at the start of her sophomore year, her depression got worse, even though she was getting therapy and she was on medication and she was doing all these positive things, but she started to disconnect more and it got into a further downward spiral. And ultimately she ended up taking her own life. And it was really devastating and heartbreaking. And part of the turmoil, like the internal struggle that followed, is like, why wasn't all these things that she was doing, like the professionals, like why weren't they succeeding? And like, why was she depressed in the first place? And also like, I've struggled with some of issues, not to the same extent, but like, what was it that allowed me to not keep spiraling down deeper, and that allowed me to break free, and what was getting in the way for her? And that's what is really the combination of those, my own experiences and like wanting to know like an answer, like there's got to be a better way to solve this situation. So I ended up getting a PhD studying depression so I could one day better help people
build
like
on
her.
that. Well, it sounds too like her situation is acute in the sense that she's doing physical activities and things that you would think would energize you, or at least take your mind off of your, malaise and the way you're feeling. And it's coming on her in waves, almost to the point where she's even having to sit out at some parts in practice, which is really unique. I'm curious because I have my own thoughts on this, and I notice it's your method seems to be not with SSRIs. It's more about those daily habits, right? And like just building that brick by brick.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's funny because a lot of people, when they read my book, well, everyone sort of brings their own initial perspective into it and takes away what they want, because some people read it sort of just like you, like, oh, I'm so glad you're so against medication. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's like a whole chapter on medication. Other people are like, oh, I'm so glad you don't demonize medication or whatever. And like, to me, what I realized is not just from her experience, because like she was taking medication, but also working in grad school for a couple psychiatrists. Most of our studies were using medication. is that the problem is when people think in black or white. And it's usually psychiatrists who are like, oh, well, there's all these studies about how effective medication is. Like, you got to treat medication. It's the solution for depression. And then usually psychologists or other mental health professionals who are like, well, you got to address the root cause. Like, medication is going to solve, your relationships. And I, like, in studying the brain, I was like, guys, like, the brain doesn't make these black or white distinctions between like all of your different approaches. Like, yeah, there's a lot of research about how helpful medication is. And, if you have 100 people that are super depressed and you give them medication, 30, 40 of them will get completely better just from taking a pill. Another 30 will get, helped somewhat, but they'll still be depressed. And then, another 30, they'll, won't be really helped at all. The problem is we don't know ahead of time who is going to benefit from which medication. In fact, that is why I worked in the lab that I did. I was like, oh, maybe there's something that we can measure about the brain that would tell us who should get which treatment. And I was, in fact, like, what are all these psychiatrists, what are all these mental health professionals doing? They're just like randomly throwing medication at the issue. Like, come on, there's got to be something we can measure about the brain. And it turns out, nope. Like, it was a little misguided. Like, there's not something wrong with the brain. It feels like there's a broken circuit, but that's not actually what's true. And you can make measurements that predict with a little accuracy, how well someone might do on medication. But the only real way to know is to give someone that medication and see how it works. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that medication is just one way to change the activity and chemistry of the brain circuits that are creating depression and anxiety and burnout. And there's nothing wrong with prescribing medication or wanting to take medication. Is when you think of that as the only answer that it becomes a problem. So many people who prescribe medication, they're like, oh, well, that medication didn't work. Well, then try this one. And then, like, they keep looking for the one, perfect pill that's going to solve everything. And it's really appealing as someone suffering, because you're like, oh, well, you can just solve it for me. But really, no, you just get lucky, perhaps, if there's medication. And there are often things that you can do on your own that target the same brain circuits and neurotransmitter systems as medication. And these sort of low-tech behavioral interventions often have a more targeted and nuanced effect than medications or other brain stimulation treatments. And so the way that I think of it, it's not like, oh, medication's over here and you either have chemical depression or you don't. Like, no, it's all brain chemicals floating around. There's just many different ways that science has identified to change the activity and chemistry of these circuits. We just don't know ahead of time which specific combination of all of these things is going to work best for your unique brain.
I'd love to get into your process and the things that you talk about in your book, but first, before I do that, I can't help but ask, when you were in the lab, before it got to the book Outward Spiral, did you walk in with any kind of perception or hypothesis or anything that was kind of like a common knowledge that was proved wrong once you got into the lab?
Oh yeah,
Or
for
maybe
sure.
something right on the same footing?
No, for sure. I was like, oh, well, I'm going into this research trying to figure out the part of the brain that is broken or malfunctioning in depression. And that is what turned out to be wrong. It seems so obvious. Like, even in working with people with depression, or later when I was doing research on anxiety, like, people feel like there's something broken in their brain. And so, like, well, obviously we got to find that. And then either you take a medication that fixes it, or you stimulate it with some sort of brain stimulation device. That was actually what my postdoc was on. I was like, oh, maybe we could just like stimulate these circuits. What I eventually realized over time is that thinking of the brain as being broken in depression is inaccurate and unhelpful. So there's not some brain scan or EEG or MRI or lab test that you can do to diagnose someone with depression or anxiety. These things are just defined by a collection of symptoms. What is actually happening in the brain is this dynamic pattern of activity and reactivity in brain circuits that we all have that is creating the problem. And the way that I like to think of it is kind of like a simple circuit, like a microphone and a speaker. If the microphone is really sensitive and oriented in a particular way, or the speaker is turned up a little too loud, then, just normal volume speech can lead to this like screeching feedback. That's a real and objective problem. Everyone can agree, like, oh, it's not supposed to do that, right? But nothing is wrong with the microphone. Nothing is wrong with the speaker. Both of them are working exactly as they are supposed to. And sometimes you need a professional to solve the problem. You need the sound engineer to tune it perfectly, but that's what they are doing, is they are tuning it. They're not fixing a broken system. And in mental health, one tool to retune it is with medication. And there's different antidepressant medications, there's anti-anxiety medications, and those can be extremely helpful. But they are also crude tools because we don't know ahead of time how exactly they will affect you. And there are many other tools that you can use on your own. And so, like, just in the microphone speaker analogy, yeah, sometimes you need some professional help, but also sometimes you could stop shouting into the microphone, or just realize, oh, I have a really sensitive microphone, which is like having a really sensitive emotional circuit. And that's not inherently bad. In a lot of times in our success obsessed, narcissistic sort of culture, we view emotions as bad, but like, it's good to have a sensitive microphone. It's better for podcasting, or like captures the soulful sounds of your singing. But if you have a sensitive microphone, you just need to be aware of that and tune your system to work best with the microphone that you have, and use it in the way that works best. And so a lot of times in depression, there's not something wrong with your brain. It's just the specific habits that you have programmed in aren't in tune with the specific neurobiology that you have combined with the circumstances of your life.
You've built the business, you've made the money, but deep down, you know that's not why you're here. You're here to rise, to embody elite health, to deepen the love you give and receive, to lead with purpose, to leave a legacy that outlives you. Rise Tribe is where affluent entrepreneurs like you align wealth with wisdom, hustle with harmony, power with purpose. This is not another mastermind. It's a movement, an inner circle of elite, high-performing leaders who demand more from life, from love, from themselves. Curated, private, invite only. Live virtual workshops on health, wealth, and expansion. Conversations that awaken your soul. Connections that elevate you. But here's the truth. Not everyone gets in. And for a limited time, membership is complimentary.
And your goals. So you can change a lot of those factors. There's tons of different ways to tune the system. And what a lot of people don't realize is that these little small life changes that you can make actually change the activity and chemistry of the brain.
I love that you brought that up. I feel like social media has had some benefits where, you know, like, for example, I come across you and then I'm inspired and now here we are talking. So there's great blessings that social media has brought. And then there's also an equal side of maybe negative effects. And one of them is you see these people out there and they say, if you have this thing, anxiety or depression, it's this one thing and that's what solves it. And everything else is wrong. You know, it's your diet, it's your gut, it's this, it's whatever. And what you talked about are small wins. And obviously, you know, with your research, with your book and with your findings, you have a set of tools that people can implement. Can you start to talk about those, because they're remarkable, of things that don't always necessarily require, like you've talked about, like, yes, maybe medication will help you for this or that, but that's not always the answer for every single thing. You've got a set of tools. So
right. Yeah, like for just this set of tools, like a lot of times people are, you know, really against medication, or they're really, I need to find medication. We should neither have a stigma against medication nor a reflexive reliance on it. It's just one way to change the activity and chemistry of the brain. And so sometimes when you're like, well, I don't know if I should see a psychiatrist or start medication, well, like, while you're sitting around trying to figure that out, start making some of these changes and then maybe the problem will go away. Or like, even when you make the appointment with a psychiatrist, start making some of these changes, maybe the problem will go away. And even when you start making medication, keep making some of these changes because it makes the medication more effective. Like, there was a cool research study on, I think, elderly people who were taking antidepressant medications. And the thing that correlated most with their improvement was how many visitors they had.
wow.
So the medication was an essential part of it. Like, they didn't just get better without medication, but like, it made them better able to appreciate or enjoy the social contact that they had. So that would have a bigger effect. And those two things combined help them break out of that cycle. So social support is one of those powerful tools. Other ones include physical activity. Sometimes people call that exercise. The problem with calling it exercise is that for a lot of people, it has a lot of negative connotations.
Right.
And exercise is something that you have to do in order to avoid negative consequences. And yeah, it doesn't really matter why you do it. Physically moving your body still has benefits. but the reasoning behind why you do it also has an effect on your brain. So that's another place that you can play with. For example, there's a cool study on rats where they gave some access to a running wheel and others had a timed treadmill run that was sort of synced to the running wheel. So they both got the exact same amount of exercise.
Wow.
Just that one rat had control. It was voluntary. Like, wow, when I feel like exercising, I'll do it. And the other rat just had to run whenever they were forced to. And they had different biochemical effects. They were all beneficial, but there's a cool chemical called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is sort of like fertilizer for brain cells, or like kind of like steroids for neurons. It makes them stronger and more resilient to stress. And voluntary exercise is better at producing this chemical and creates more neuroplasticity than forced exercise, which makes complete intuitive sense, because it's the difference between running because you're being chased by something versus running because you're the one doing the chasing. So yeah, exercise is good, but also clarifying why you are doing it. Are you running towards something that's important to you? I'm going to have more energy to play with my kids. I'm going to be more focused at work. Or are you running away from something that you're trying to avoid? Well, I don't want to be depressed anymore. Like, oh, I'm sick and tired of this. And like, yeah, that can get you to run, but sometimes it creates more stress and robs you of these neurochemical benefits. So like setting goals is another one, and reframing your thoughts and physical activity and social support and gratitude. Like that was one of those ones that before I started doing research on this, I was like, okay, yeah, you're supposed to think positive. Okay, yeah, that's good. But like, come on, like, let's get to the real science. And what I realized is like, no, there's a lot of amazing research about gratitude, like focusing on the positive parts of your life actually stimulates the brainstem region that produces dopamine. It can have many other effects, and it can reduce anxiety, can improve your sleep. And for me, certain of these tools that I had dismissed before, like gratitude or self-compassion, or even deep breathing, knowing the neuroscience helped me get out of my own way, because I was like, oh, that's like real. That's not just some like BS you hear on social media or whatever. Like there's actually a real thing that you're like changing your brain. Oh, then maybe I don't just have to do this because this random person told me to. Oh, maybe I want to do it because it gives me the power to start to control some of these brain circuits. And so there's this whole menu of options that you have available to you to start to change the activity and chemistry of your brain. Some of those things you can't do on your own, like medication or therapy. That's fine. Some of the things you can do on your own. Great. If you want to start doing it on your own, start with those things. If they don't solve it, okay, great. Start with some help. If you're like, no, I can't do any of these things on your own, that's fine. Start with help. Like there's not one clear path or one protocol that works for everyone. There's this whole toolbox, and the goal is to quickly identify what works best for your unique brain and your specific circumstances. And that is we should absolutely use science to help with that. Science has identified here are the tools that can help you. So you're not just like using magical thinking, but which combination of tools in what exact amount? Well, no one has done that study on your brain. But here's the toolbox, and here's the process for how you can start to change your brain to reach those goals that you have.
Have you found that people that have a religious belief, and doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned on what their belief is, but I would argue most religions in the world talk about gratitude, right? Like, thanking a higher power for their blessings, um, love, giving, like being appreciative, like those kind of fundamentals. Is
And
there any
also
research? Yeah,
social support. Like they have a
yeah,
lot of things built in, positive rituals and positive ways of interacting with other people that are part of the religion, particularly in times of stress. So you know
yeah.
exactly what to do.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and now I think I'm leading to the question, which is there any research or any beliefs that you've found in regards to people that a religion having a belief in God is beneficial, or not?
Yeah, no, like having a belief in God can be very helpful. I think there's a lot of research showing that having religion or spirituality helps boost your well-being. The problem, though, comes from like, well, and it also may have unintended consequences. So, like, um, the sometimes having this belief that like, oh well, God's in control, well, that can help you feel less stressed because you're like, oh, I know that it will all work out.
Mhm.
However, it could also make you more passive because you're like, well, it'll work out. That's why there's a lot of emphasis and like, well, no, like God works through you. So you have to take action. Okay, well, so then if you're interpreting it that way, then is it God actually doing this or is it you actually doing this? And that's where like it starts to break down. Like we don't need God to be a part of it because like God is just this sort of this symbolic thing of um, and it can be a stand-in for the universe or any specific God that you want. So what is powerful is like, right, having a belief that there is meaning in life and that
Purpose. Yeah.
there things will work out and that there's morality and that we should have habits of how we treat other people. And religions have often come up with their protocol, their
Hmm.
solution that they've figured out over thousands of years that tends to work for a lot of people. And awesome, great. And if it's working for you, great. I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't believe in God, but just believing in God and doing all these specific rituals isn't going to work for everyone. Like because everyone's brain is different. And that's where I've come to realize like, okay, well, sure, if you're religious and you want to view it in a religious way, like go for it. And if you're not religious and you don't want to include religion, that's also fine. You probably do need to find a way to have, or at least practices to have gratitude and purpose. You don't need to bring God specifically into it. But for many people, that's a shortcut. It's not like for me, I was really drawn to this idea of existentialism from this class I took in college that like, and one of the most powerful stories or examples from that class that stuck with me was, I think, one from Kierkegaard about how like God commands Abraham to slay his son. And you could be like, well, right, if God tells you to do something, you have to do it. But in existentialism, it's essentially saying like, okay, but you're still responsible. Like you're the one who has to decide that yes, God is the one talking to me and not, the devil. And you're the one who has to decide that like, oh, well, if God tells me to do something that I believe is morally wrong, that it's more important for me to follow God than it is.
What if the real secret to explosive business growth wasn't found in tactics, trends, or tech, but in something far more primal, something every human being craves? Love. Real, genuine, emotional connection. You've tried the funnels, you've chased the hacks, you've burned money on ads that promised magic but delivered mediocrity. It's not your fault. You've been sold noise when what your marketing needs is music. This book changes everything. Rooted in behavioral science and built on the same relationship-based marketing formulas used by billion-dollar brands, this time-tested framework doesn't just teach you how to market, it transforms the way you see your customers. You'll learn how to turn cold traffic into loyal fans, how to spark love at first scroll, and how to build an unshakable bond that makes your brand unforgettable. Because in a world drowning in gimmicks, authenticity is your unfair advantage. This isn't theory. It's the engine behind some of the fastest growing businesses in the world. And it's helped smart entrepreneurs like you build tribes, not just audiences. Agencies use it, CMOs swear by it, buyers can't put it down. It's won multiple awards, and it's climbing the charts because real marketing that connects always wins. So stop chasing attention, start building love, and watch your business take off. Grab your copy now at Target.com, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble retail stores, or anywhere quality books are sold. Your future customers are waiting for love. It's time to give it to them. Get your copy of Marketing Built by Love today.
For me to follow what my own moral choice is. And that's fine if you want to choose to follow God, but you are still the one making that choice. So even if you have religion and God, like you are the one making that choice. That can be comforting a lot of times to be like, oh, okay, well, it's out of my hands. Like, the pressure's not on me. Like, it's not true. The pressure still is on you, but you can pretend like, oh, well, I just have to, follow the word, or I just have to follow these things. And that is very comforting. And for a lot of people, that is helpful. But sometimes that's constrictive, where you're like, well, but I feel like God is telling me to do this one thing, but I really feel like this. And like, yeah, it is challenging to be the one who is responsible for your own happiness. This is not blaming the victim. Like, it's obviously more challenging for some people in their based on their situation, based on their biology. But like, there's also some cool neuroscience about that, just to get back to the brain, because research shows that when you are making choices and there's risk to either win or lose, you have more activity in the reward circuits and these like emotion, physical feeling circuits, because it feels alive to feel like your choices have consequences. If on the other hand, a computer is making your choices for you, reduces that intensity, sometimes that can be extremely helpful if you have a very emotional brain and you can't deal with the intensity of these emotions. And that if you had to deal with the intensity of these emotions for too long, then you would, spiral downward or become an alcoholic. And so just having someone else take a little bit of responsibility helps you get into this ideal zone. But sometimes that can make you passive and then miss out on some of that intensity that comes with making choices and having them work out, and being really excited, and then making other choices and then not work out and being heartbroken. But that's like what living is all about. And often what happens in depression is your brain gets exhausted of that like big highs and lows if you have a brain that's very emotional. And then it's like, I know the solution. Let's just not care about anything. So like depression is often your brain's solution to this emotionality, but there's other ways out of it. One is religion, but you don't have to do that. Or really, it's about recognizing what are all the pieces that make up religion. You could just do those things as well.
Most of our listeners are. Go ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
Sorry. It's just something I wanted to build on that because it got me thinking too. I mean, there's some interesting aspects here about just modern life, telling our brains positive things too. In a sense, there's a way of like not just dwelling on that, but sort of directing aspects of it. I'm curious though on what your thoughts are on almost this like modern view of life where it's endlessly positive. We're always going to have great days. And we're supposed to live that way where it's every day is a smiley day, right? Instead, I feel like in the past, you could have a bad day. You could have a Monday or the blues, or you could, and this is no way to diminish anything that, that people would be suffering from. But I'm curious on your thoughts about just like sort of the positive aspects of maybe just looking at a part of your life and realizing I need to do some work here. And it's not necessarily depression. It's just a way of, it's a radar, right?
No, I think, there are a few things that come to mind. One, just sort of continuing on that topic of religion. I remember like going to a conference where there are a lot of religious people, and they sort of always, when someone would shared something negative, like there often was like, oh no, it's fine, it'll work out. Oh, I believe in God. And then sometimes it's like your belief in God that it'll all work out means like it's invalidating of your own struggles. And then certainly it's invalidating to other people's struggles. She's like, oh, well, you just don't have enough faith. And then it's like, ooh, I was trying to share my difficulties so that we could connect. So yes, it's good to have a belief in God, but it's also important to connect with other people and also important to validate your own emotions. And I think that is something that can get in the way of. The other way I think about this sometimes is this like incessant pathological need to be happy and productive all the time. I call the sort of the Silicon Valley view of happiness that like, oh, well, as soon as something goes wrong, okay, you just need to pivot or think about it a different way and take action, blah, blah, blah. And like it undermines a lot of the important parts of being human, because like there are a lot of things that are important in your life that we don't have control over. There's nothing to do with them other than like bad things happen to people that you care about, like mistakes happen, like you are going to die, like all of these things, like big questions. And there's nothing like that you can do about them. Like, yes, you can eat healthy and exercise and do all these things to reduce the fact that you're going to die. But like at the end of the day, there's still some piece where there's emotions and there's literally nothing to do with those emotions other than to experience them. And it is often these negative emotions that are telling us what is meaningful in life. So like, let's say you had a dog for 14 years, you love the dog, it's your favorite dog, and then your dog dies. Someone's like, oh, well, you just get a new dog. Like, is that like, it's sort of psychopathic to be like, okay, well, that dog's dead, let me get a new dog. Like, right, if you don't mourn the dog, like people are like, why are you mourning? The dog's not going to bring the dog back. Right? Like it is the natural human reaction, and it is an indication of how meaningful this was to you. And if you don't allow yourself to have these negative emotions, then you kind of suck away a lot of the meaningfulness in life. And that is often what happens even in depression, is when you have very big emotions. And some people's brains are more emotionally reactive than other people. And those people are more likely to get stuck in this downward spiral of depression. Just like with the microphone, some people have a microphone that is more sensitive. Yep. And a very powerful speaker. Those people are more likely to get stuck in this feedback because your brain essentially is like, oh my God, we can't deal with screeching feedback. That's too much. So let's turn down the volume on everything. And then you're like, why do I have no motivation for everything? Because then when you start to turn the volume back up, all of a sudden the screeching feedback comes through. So you need to like find ways to adjust that aren't as coarse. We need meaningfulness, but having meaning creates strong emotions. And having things that you can't control creates strong emotions. So does that mean we should just eliminate all of the meaning and like just cede control? No, like you want to have strong emotions. You just want to have them toned down enough that they don't create a downward spiral.
This is a dangerous question, and I've been contemplating if I should ask this, right? Because in my book that I published and wrote about, there was research, and now I'm talking to a neuroscientist, so this is where it gets dangerous. As I talked about again on what I had found from research, is that your brain is wired to be negative to help you survive.
Yeah.
And so in marketing, when you're talking about like fear and scarcity, that if you drive on those things rather than pleasure, the brain is going to react and respond more to the aversion of fear than like go on the vacation and enjoy the nice sandy beach. And your brain's like, yeah, that's nice, but also I'm way more concerned about this tiger around the corner that's going to attack me. So I wrote about that. Now you can debunk that.
No, I'm not going to debunk it. It's like mostly true. What I was going to debunk is that, and one of the things I wanted to update in the second edition is like there was research about like your brain has a negative bias. And what's crucial is to understand like, well, what does that mean? And there used to be research about like, well, so because it has a negative bias, you need 3 times as many positive events and whatever. And that's like, there's not really a specific positivity ratio that you can find. And it's also helpful to understand that like a lot of what we call the brain's negativity bias is really our positivity bias. Like if you assume that everything is going to go well and smoothly and amazing, and then it's just like, okay, well, then you're disappointed. So if you're disappointed, does that mean, oh, well, you're focusing on the negative? Or it's like, no, you're only doing that because you had this positivity bias where you just assumed that everything was going to be amazing. And our emotions are a reflection of the difference between what we expected or we assumed and like what actually happened. So you could describe that as a negativity bias, but you could also describe that as a positivity bias. So that's just one nuance. But the reason why what you said is true is like our brain is wired for survival. Like that's also true. That's not necessarily a negativity. Well, that part of the brain is focused on the negative. But it's also helpful to realize
negative of like risk aversion. Is that when you say negative of like risk aversion? Or
but so one of the things to recognize, and one of the things that I actually wanted to emphasize in the preface of the book, because it was like just a basic concept that I realized like, oh, a lot of people were overlooking because they're just like looking at a bunch of tools. The key thing to understand about your brain is that there are different parts of your brain that have different goals, and they're pulling you in different directions. So you have a reward circuit that's like, oh, there's a fruit in that tree. I should go climb out of the tree and eat the fruit. I bet it's really delicious. Okay, great. You also have a part of your brain that's like, ooh, that branch looks like it's dead and I might fall and die. It is essential to have both parts of both parts of your brain functioning Because some of the things like, right, you should act on impulse and do what's exciting. And you have another part of your brain that's focused on your long-term goals. It's just that these emotion circuits, these deep emotion circuits are like really fast and aren't under our conscious control always. And so whatever you're doing, whatever task you're doing, whatever goals you have, when you're just relaxing, enjoying your life, your amygdala and deeper emotional circuits are constantly scanning for what could go wrong.
Right.
Because they're trying to protect you. And it's actually more dangerous to see something that you're like, you think it could go wrong, or you think it could be dangerous, and to be like, it's probably fine. Like, that grass waving, it's probably not a lion. Like, right, then you're more likely to get eaten by a lion. So these emotion circuits evolved to be really sensitive to moments of uncertainty that could be catastrophic and really dangerous, because it's better to be walking through a field and see, a stick and jump and assume it's a snake than to be like, just step on the snake and get bitten by it. So that asymmetry is why these brain circuits are going to call your attention to things that are potentially problematic. That in and of itself, however, is not a problem. But people like who have brains that are really emotionally reactive in that way are more likely to get stuck in depression and anxiety. And they could say, it's because I just have this really sensitive microphone that's really picking up all the little, right, that's contributing to the problem. But it's not the cause of it. Like, what's causing it is like, right, you have this sensitivity, and then that is triggering certain habits that's in a totally different part of your brain. And then those habits are changing your goals, and you spiral downward. If you could instead realize like, thank you, brain, for reminding me of all these terrible things that could happen if I tried to start a company. I could lose all my money. I could waste all of my time. Okay, well, the CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the analytical part, can be like, oh yeah, you're right. Thank you for reminding me. That's a great reason to not start a company. Or it could be like, you're right. I should take all of that into account when I'm coming up with my plan, so I can come up with a better plan so those catastrophic things don't happen. But there will always be some uncertainty. It's just how strongly my brain reacts to that uncertainty. In what ways does it continue to force me to focus on all of the terrible things that could happen and how little control I have over them? Or do I have more positive coping habits that cause me to focus on the important stuff that I want and what I have control over in getting it? And both of those things are true. It's just our negative emotions often focus on what's important that's often out of our control. And our habits, the habit circuit in your brain pulls you towards what you have control over, whether or not it's important. And the CEO's job is to get those things aligned so that I'm doing this habit, I'm just procrastinating or scrolling my phone, even though what I really want is to spend time with my kids. Or like you're focused on something that's terrible. Oh my God, something bad might happen to my kids. Okay. So is that a reason to ignore it and go drink alcohol or scroll on my phone? Or is that a reason to be grateful for the time that I have with them because something bad might happen? And it's both, but it is the specific tuning that you have in your brain and how these different circuits are programmed that can create this downward spiral that you get stuck in. And just by making small changes in these different habits or your mindset, it doesn't like completely solve the problem. It just, turns down the volume on your emotional activity. So it makes it a little bit easier to make a positive choice and so on.
Our listener is mostly entrepreneurs, right? That they very much well know the risk and reward of building a business or investing my time or energy here versus there. And so with like your tool set, one of the things you mentioned is, excuse me, with your tool set, one of the things that you mentioned is goals. Now, if you don't mind, expand on this for just a moment, because what it sounds like to me is with goals, it's going to help you have a baseline of what your purpose is, of the things that you're going after. That
I'm just gonna say something, because your audience is entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are terrible with the tool of goals and misunderstand why they are using it and over rely on goals. And it creates unnecessary stress and anxiety and also undermines your motivation. So goals are extremely helpful. Like, they help your brain know, well, what should I focus on and what should I ignore? Because there's constantly tons of information that's floating from the outside world, from your own thoughts. And your brain needs to know, like, well, which of those thoughts should I amplify and which ones should I ignore? Mm-hmm. And goals allow the CEO of your brain to amplify the dopamine response towards anything that you're making progress towards this goal. And so it's extremely helpful. The problem is, do you have the right goals? Are they aligned with your values and deepest dreams? And values and dreams are really amorphous. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to know how you're making progress on them. It's much easier to know and release a lot more dopamine to make specific, concrete progress towards a goal. So like in youth sports, they always talk about, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Well, everyone can tell how many goals you score. It's really hard to know, well, did I play the game? In poker, you can just see easily, well, did you win money or did you lose money? It is very hard to know, like, right, but did you make the right choices at the right time? Did you get the right read and just get unlucky? In your business or your career, it's really easy to see how much money you're making. It's really hard to determine how fulfilled you are. So when these emotion circuits are like, hey, I think they're whispering, they're like, hey, I think you're kind of moving towards burnout, or like you're losing your motivation, or you're missing the important moments with your kids. The goal-oriented part of us, which entrepreneurs are great at, is like, shut up. Like, you're a distraction from this goal that I have. And then you have a goal and you get a promotion or you build your business, and then it somehow feels empty. Why? Because the part that created fulfillment and meaning you viewed as a distraction, when in fact it's entirely the part of where your motivation comes from. The other piece, like your values and your deepest dreams, these are things that we can't always easily achieve. So if your dream, like, I want to cure cancer, right? I want to help humanity. Like, that is something that excites you. These big ideas that you're excited about. And you're excited about them because they're important. And you're like, I don't know if I can do it. And that's what gets your emotions involved. The problem, though, is if you're a good goal-oriented person who is also very self-critical, you have this big dream, but then you can't immediately think of a pathway for how you would get there. And that creates frustration or disappointment. You're like, oh my God, it's this dream. I'm really excited. And but how would I get there? Okay, well, then that dream is, we throw it out because we're like, well, that's just making me frustrated and unhelpful. I'm going to break it down into a smaller goal that I can actually achieve. But like the frustration and the anxiety sometimes that you feel about these big, amazing dreams are because they're so important to you. And if you just, well, let me just pick a more manageable goal, then you've suddenly sucked out all of the big, important emotions that help motivate you. And so we're like, wow, I should create a SMART goal. And we create a SMART goal. And then we wonder, like, well, why am I not excited about this? And so you first in this process, like, don't be so practical. Dream, listen to what your emotions are telling you about what is important to you. That is a crucial part of the process. Then create specific goals that are aligned with those bigger dreams and deeper values. And then, break them down into actionable pieces. But a lot of times the part of our brain that's focused on our big dreams is pulling us in one direction. And then, but we've already set this goal and I got to hit my quarterly targets and that's pulling me in this direction. And then you eventually burn out because you're fighting against yourself. Once you get these different brain circuits aligned, the CEO of your brain and the emotion circuit in your brain and the habit and goals circuit in your brain, once those are all aligned, then it's really easy to consistently perform at your best.
I love that you said that. Rich, just you're next. I love that you said that because so many times when, well, at least from my experience working with entrepreneurs from all over the world, it's always, we're going to increase revenue by 20%. We're going to hit this goal. We're going to hit that goal. And they put all of their effort, all of their focus on that. They'll end up working weekends. They'll work late. They'll stop working out. They'll have high stress. They'll start to drink. Their marriages start to fall apart. And they'll have all that money in that bank account and they'll hit that goal. But then once they step out of that office, their life is in shambles. And so that's one of the key things that I'm trying to talk about now. I've gone through that myself, where you focus on one thing and everything else is secondary. And so thank you for bringing that up, because the reality is that you have to have purpose and you have to have gratitude and you have to have that balance. Because that one thing, if that becomes the CEO and the driving factor and everything else falls apart, well, you're going to be in a worse off place than you were originally.
And those, I think part of what getting that alignment is in the short term, these things feel like a distraction. So I want to get work done. I'm doing my postdoc. I got this new fancy MacBook Air. I could just sit down on the couch and start typing on my laptop. And then this pain in my hip comes down, or this sort of energy dwindling pops up after a few weeks. And I could ignore it for a while. And that seems like a distraction, but it's not, because guess what? If I actually exercised and got some sunlight, then I would be more productive over the course of the day and the week and the month. And I would be more happy and satisfied with it. But in that 5-minute period, when I'm like, whoa, I should start doing work, it feels like it is a distraction to go for a walk. I'm like, why would I go for a walk if I'm, when I could just be doing work? And that's where we're like, oh, right. I'm not going for a walk for no reason. It's that what is important to me is not how productive I am in the next 5 minutes. What is important to me is how productive I am over the next 5 months. I might be frustrated that I'm not getting as much done right now. But the thing to do with that frustration is not to ignore it and just try and be as productive, because then I'll burn out. The thing to do with that frustration is to realize right, well, there's certain parts about my life that I can't change. And that is frustrating. The fact that I have a human body, the fact that I have an emotional brain. And guess what? The fact that I have an emotional brain is one of my greatest features. It makes me a better leader and entrepreneur. But if every time my emotional brain is starting to, be used, and I'm like, stop it, you're getting in the way of my short-term goal, well, then that's what's creating the problem. And so when you realize these things that you often feel are distractions, like exercise or sleep or spending time with your family. It's only in how you are viewing the time frame. They are distractions if you're only looking about the short term. And if you only think of it as a series of short terms, that life is just a bunch of sprints, you run away from that lion, and then, there's another tiger, and you run away from that, and you run away from that. Well, then it's exhausting and pointless. And that's like what nihilism is. Like, what's the point? Well, you just run away from that line, you get away. Okay, you're like, what are you running towards? What is actually important to you? How do you know when you have reached it? And if the answer is never, well, yeah, then you're going to be exhausted at some point and burnt out. But these things that we often think of as distractions are actually contributing to our productivity and our success. And then our success contributes to your ability to support your family and be more present and whatever. That is an upward spiral. But most of us, when we start to be pulling in different directions and we feel pulled in 1,000 different directions, then we inadvertently create a downward spiral.
Yeah, I had a question on this because I think this is always a part of coping. It's a hindrance for many people, and it plagues even high achieving people like entrepreneurs, which is procrastination. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on procrastination. Is it a symptom of a thought that we have? Is it just a defect in our personalities? Is it a coping mechanism? I'm curious what you think on all that.
I should apologize also. I'm going to have to leave in like 3 minutes. I have another call, but happy to answer that question quickly and maybe we can wrap it
Sure.
up. So yeah, procrastination is something that I experienced a lot. And it was one of those things like, why am I, procrastinating? I know this thing is so important to me and I have to remind myself how important it is to me. And it's helpful to remember, like, right, things that are important to you have the potential to create strong emotions. And it's precisely because it's so important and you're not sure if you can get it done in time or if it'll meet your own high standards that creates the stress. And procrastination is your brain's solution to dealing with that stress, because your deeper reward circuits are like, well, you're like, oh my God, I need to do this thing. I have to work on this project. Or you can just scroll on your phone. And you're like, why would I do that? I don't want to scroll on my phone. No, you do want to scroll on your phone. Because guess what? Scrolling your phone will immediately make you feel better. And so like when you're scrolling on your phone, your brain is trying to make you feel calmer and better. It's just that, it doesn't address the source of why you're feeling so stressed in the first place. But you do it because it helps you feel better. And the more that you remind yourself how important it is to you to do work and how bad it is that you're procrastinating, that just adds more stress, which just pulls you further into this habit. Because when we are stressed, it automatically triggers the habit circuit in our brain. And also the more that you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I doing this? Well, that doesn't help you break out of the habit. What helps you break out of it is like, makes perfect sense why I just want to scroll on my phone. Because this presentation, this project is so important to me. It's creating all this stress. Okay, so what's a better way to deal with this stress? Let me do some breathing. Or maybe if I went for a run, then I wouldn't be so stressed out. And you're like, no, but I don't have time for going for a run. I have to do this stress. But like, if you have already a habit of going for a run when you're stressed, and a habit of talking to your friends when you're stressed, and a habit of going to sleep early, well, then when you're stressed, it automatically triggers these helpful habits and sets you right back on track. But we don't program in those helpful habits because we're constantly viewing them as a distraction. Like, it's just procrastinating. Is it? Or is it helping you? And the thing about procrastination, why it's so rampant, is because there are many people who procrastinate who are not as smart and talented as you. And those people failed out of high school or, failed out of college or became a drug addict because they procrastinated and then they failed. You procrastinated and procrastinated and procrastinated. And then, because the intensity built up enough that you're like, oh, well, it's out of my control. I just have to start doing it right now. Well, that's like, the lion jumped out of the bush and okay, well, I got to start running now. And you were fast enough and talented enough that you could get it done. It wasn't satisfying because you're like, well, if I'd started earlier, I wouldn't have, I would have done better or whatever. But like, you got it done. And so you're rewarded for that procrastination. And also it feels really invigorating right? To be running away from that lion. So you get addicted to that stress. And so your brain is like, why next time when this happens, should I do this boring thing when we could just like scroll on our phone for a while and then we know we'll get it done later. And so realizing that different parts of your brain are pulling you in different directions, that you're caught in this pattern is really helpful because you have two options. Either you could just accept that you could do something that's slightly uncomfortable in the moment. You're going to be slightly more stressed out to actually do this thing, but it'll help you do a better job. Or realize, it's perfectly fine. It's not procrastinating if it's intentional. Yeah, I want to scroll on my phone and I'll just wait till the last minute. Okay, until you realize like, what's wrong with waiting to the last minute? Why don't I just enjoy my life for a week and then leave everything to the last minute? And for some people, that's a perfectly reasonable solution. But if you're like, no, I could do that when I was 25, but I'm unable or unwilling to do that now when I'm 45 because I can't physically stay up late as much, or I'm unwilling to have the sacrifices for my relationship or my family that come with that. So, but you could do that. That's where the choice comes in. It's like, oh, yeah, I could do that. I could just procrastinate. Oh, great. There's no problem with that. And then I just get rid of all this unnecessary stress. But once you realize like, oh, it's my choice. I am choosing. I'm not being forced to work now. I'm choosing to work now because I'm unwilling to pay the cost. But stop focusing on so much on what the cost is. Like, well, I have to stress now or stress later. Well, like, no, focus on what you get. Well, either I could enjoy my life right now and just scroll on my phone, or I could enjoy my kids' soccer game or a date with my wife. Okay, which of those is more important to you? But you're the CEO of your brain can help figure that out. But the automatic deeper circuits of your brain will just automatically focus your attention on the important stuff that you can't control.
I have written down about 30 separate notes here of little bits of wisdom that you have dropped. I could keep you on this podcast for probably 4 hours, and we're gonna.
Yeah, I would love. I mean, as you can see, I love talking about this stuff. Unfortunately, I have a coaching call for my coaching program to go to right now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We'll have to have you back. At the very end, if you can, for the listener who's probably wondering, like, how do I get more of Alex? Can you plug your book, any other social handles or anything so they know where to go and find you?
At Alex Korb, PhD. My name is on Instagram or Facebook, and that's my website as well, alexkorbphd.com. I have some really helpful resources, like a mental clarity blueprint and other things that people can use if you want to really understand and have the full toolbox. And the second edition of The Upward Spiral is out right now. I'm excited because this time I'm doing the audio book. So if you like listening to me, I spent 3 days in the studio recording it. The first edition sold over 200,000 copies. It's been translated into like 14 languages. And because science isn't static and nor is personal growth, I wanted to update it from the last 10 years. So I'm really excited. But yeah, start following me or start following some of the insights from the book. And if you need more help, I do have a coaching program. I'm happy to help. I work with smart, successful people who are sick and tired of getting stuck in these cycles.
I think that's just about everybody that's listening to this. And just for if anyone's listening to this and they're not listening to the audio, it's Alex, and the last name Korb is Korb. So alexkorbphd.com. Alex, it was an absolute pleasure. You're going to have to come back on if you'd be so willing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you.